Welcome everyone to this YouTube Masterclass. It's programmed through Coursera. It can get you through units. This is a 4-unit class. It's film auteur theory. That is director specializing in himself. Auteur, that is D.W.Griffith, who has such a range of personality. I mean, everything from like Let's Be Fire Pilots to Let's Stand Up for the Blacklist, and some of his causes were really contagious around Hollywood and spread through there, like his original anti-Semitism, where he was casting Jewish people in the movie who ended up already having the studio of Warner Brothers. And I find Griffith's later finding the place that the Holocaust was happening, for instance, the Jewish Holocaust was happening. And Griffith found that place in a plane when Charlie Chaplin told him it was real, and they both were facing jail time for even being communists, and that was a really wild turn of events. But today, my friends, and this is for USC, Calarts, and of course, Harvard. And, you know, whether or not I can get you through to all the units you need in terms of a major, then you can take the electives according to Coursera and still get your degree. Your bachelor's is what we're shooting for here, because these are 400 level classes. If a graduate were to take this, they would have to go to the 400 level and see if the school was giving them graduate credit. That some of it could be considered graduate credit, but they'd be judged by a much stiffer final, of which I have not completed the much stiffer final. But let me know, anyone, if you're interested in this 400 level credit, and even not this class, the 300 level, but film criticism that played before this can count towards your graduate degree. This is a 300 class, though it is actually harder than the other ones, because we have to remember all these like esoteric and minutia type things about D.W. Griffith to even figure out if A, he knew that the Birth of a Nation was so racist that it was in error. When you're sitting there going, I don't want to have to play this race card forever, but you really made a racist movie, and no one is sitting there understanding why, because it could have gone the other way. But then again, in all of cinema, there's been kind of this veneration of the KKK, and even Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, done by Jewish people. They're still sitting there going, well, the KKK are funny because they're these big, grotesque, like, out of control, like, killers themselves, you know. We've had long discussions among my friends about, like, how we feel about, you know, movies about the Klan. We don't, personally, me and my friends don't really mind them, because they're like, well, it's part of history, and I don't really mind seeing the Klan in a movie because they're always shown in a bad light in every other movie. That doesn't give them the excuse to show them in a good light, like in Birth of a Nation. But I don't like that they're racist, but that they're vigilantes stopping violence, and there's all that going on with Birth of a Nation, and then you get into the whole searchers coming from a Birth of a Nation. I'm like, well, personally, I think it's racist, but that doesn't mean I don't like it as a film. I mean, there's always a degree of racism on films. You know, I had this friend in film school, Lorenzo Minetti, and he said, I think all films are racist at this point. We can just say that. And while I'd like to disagree with him, I'm looking through titles of every director, and somebody's got something that's subjective from another point of view that they're trying to place in their own subjectivity, which can be very difficult if you're not, like, kind of getting ready for it the whole time. If you're getting ready for all your projects the whole time you're here on Earth, then you'll eventually finish a few projects, because you'll be pushing forward on them and moving them. And in Masterclass, we recommend that. But today we're on D.W. Griffith channel anyway. Behind me, and I'd like to show you this, but if you go to Google and type in the short films of D.W. Griffith, you can follow me down this list. I'll have to expand that list of videos if you're on that with me, if you can access a computer. And we're looking at D.W. Griffith short films, and I don't know if these are in order, but it looks kind of like they are. And it looks like he actually made a movie in 1908 that was a crime drama short film, and it's called Money Mad, and it's 10 minutes long. And you know, I don't know where I sit on seeing these. I've seen almost all of these, but this one, yes, I've seen this one. It says in the explanation, it says parsimonious is a Harphanon, Wow, these are really strange words. Like Focine boarded his money in a secret cellar. Oh, an old miser, who is too parsimonious as a Hierophant. Well, I don't quite get the reference there, but here he is, making movies in 1908 when he's still a stunt double in Tin Pan Alley. And that a 1908 film survived at all with D.W.Griffith's a good thing, but the Great Train Robbery was actually... You'll have to excuse me, the Great Train Robbery was actually out before that. That having been a silent film and not many silent films surviving in the early decade of the 1900s. This one is At the Auteur, 1909. At the Italian boarding house, the male boarders were all smitten with the charms of Minnie, the landlady's pretty daughter. I mean, these are amazing plots. I love these plots to movies. You can see that Griffith really loves storyline in these early plots. The Lonely Via, I've definitely seen that one. It's a relief these days to watch a film in which the camera isn't jumping around all over the place. Just letting the actors tell a story. Wow. Well, I don't know where they got that quote from, but that's pretty good. Fools of Fate, 1909. Fanny is the wife of Ben Webster, a trapper. While he is affectionate and dutiful husband, she yearns for something which appears. Fools of Fate, 1909. Adventures of Dolly, we talked about that in class, and I think that was his first one, only this is saying it's 1908, and I thought it was 1906, but there could be an update in the biography. The internet would on the internet now, and it's probably the closest one. These aren't in order because we'll go back to 1909, and it's this movie called Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe, D.W.Griffith, drama, biography, short, silent film. These are all short films, you know. I think I told you that, but I didn't reiterate that they were making only short films at that time in history. And from Money, we talked about Money, Mad, At the Altar, The Lonely Via, Fools of Fate, The Adventures of Dolly, and Edgar Allan Poe, and they're all short films of D.W. Griffith when he first started directing films. Those were his first films of all. Now, The Usurer, 1910, is a silent short film by D.W. Griffith. The Usurer, silent short film, D.W. Griffith, Linda Everett, Max Sennett. And Max Sennett, as we all know, was the comedian that trained Charlie Chaplin. And Mary Pickford was in The Usurer. And I've seen that one in film school even. That was almost the first reeler because it was almost 20 minutes. It was a 17-minute film, it says here on the dial list. Those Awful Hats, 1909. See, we're jumping back in time. A silent Hall of Fame is created. Yeah, this is funny because Those Awful Hats is the one where they're at the movie theater and those ladies sat down with the hats. It's a really famous silent film. They're all sitting down in front of those guys and their hats are all tall and everything, and the guys are like pushing them down to like see the movie or see the stage at all behind these ridiculous hats. So beware what hats you wear into a theater. Griffith will make them everything and the kitchen sink and Those Awful Hats. And I just find it funny that they were making films that were about what film attendance and seeing theater was like, and that they were using the theater as a metaphor of the film, and that the people blocking the screen or blocking the stage are distracting from the show, and so it's a show about a show getting distracted, and I love shows about shows. And then this one is The Painted Lady, 1912, and I'm not quite sure what that one is about. But if I could recruit you for a moment to go on, there's the Father of Film documentary that I was telling you all about, the Father of Film documentary from the BBC. And someday I'll have to find that exact BBC thing. This is episode 1, though. Whoever's following me on the short films of D.W. Griffith. Romance or Jewish. That sounds anti-Semitic, so we're going to skip it, but it's ghetto life. Sympathy and sentimentality. That sounds kind of racist. I'm not going to go with that one. That one seems a little like we got to deduct it from the overall score because something doesn't sound right about that. And then His Trust is His Trust, and this is in Spanish for some reason, so we're going to say that Su Responsabilidad, I don't know that D.W.Griffith went Spanish on it, or there's only one surviving print, but I've seen it in English, and it looks like it's in English back there on the subtitles. And then you can go into this YouTube list of all his films from the Biograph short films. And that's where we want to go eventually, but we're moving right along here. We're still, so we'll take a look at some of these shorts as we go, but I want to describe a few more before we get off this list and go back to the main list of features, because there's a lot to go. And really, Sally the Sawdust and True Heart Susie weren't the last of the films we're going to discuss. I just had to tell you, we just have to catalog that there's all these short films too, because we're responsible for knowing the short films eventually in this kind of grander scheme of how cinema evolved. And so then you get this one called The New York Hat, and we already know it's the sequel of the other one, the hat one, Those Awful Hats. So now it's like the New York Hat's the type of hat that would block the stage in a different way, but it's a New York way. And then he made this, and that's just another parody on how film life is when you're making a great film and it gets blocked by a hat or whatever. And then actually the New York Hat does also belong to a narrative a little longer than that, where she goes about her business and then does come across the hat that's being given to her by an old friend who's got trouble in his life, and she sees him. So there is kind of this melodrama plot developing by 1912. And then you get this movie with Mary Pickford called Friends, and it says remastered. It doesn't really give us much to go on, but I have seen it, and it's funny. It's like it's like sad, but it's this girl who's like lives on a farm or something, and it's this thing where these friends are like, I think it's a class structure film where Mary Pickford's poorer, her character is poorer, which in real life she was filthy rich, but in this movie she's acting like someone poor, and this is a big moment for cinema doing that. And then it's like her friend that she's fighting with is the rich one. Now, there's been another look at how this film is, that they were friends despite their money differences, but you could say she could never quite have the freedom that the rich one did, although in today's society we kind of see that as a dated point of view, because a woman can find other ways in her behaviors to be friendly, to be kind, and then sometimes just come out just like dominating better than the guy's able to do. And I feel that way about women. Like, they do harder work, and they do work harder because they have to push twice as hard. So I'm going to back up Mary Pickford and say, good working with Griffith again. Don't ever stop your commentary on rich versus poor, because we like watching movies like that, where it's like the poor guy gets a shot at the rich girl or whatever, and then it's over right away. It's like Roman Holiday it evolves with, and it comes from that buddy film type atmosphere that Mary Pickford's in. And then there's The House with the Closed Shutters, and that's 1910, so we're going back a bit, and it's kind of a horror film. It's a short film. It's about 16 minutes, almost a full reel. It's 20 minutes a reel. The House with Closed Shutters, and it says La Casa con las Persianas. Yeah, the house that presence enchadas, which his presence is elusive. I don't know. Well, let's go down here and read the language. I can read some Spanish, but this is really intense because it's like these Spanish critics that wrote about Griffith and reanimated his early films. And there's Edgar Allan Poe again. We already saw that. The House of Darkness. Okay. Silent short film, almost a reel long. House of Darkness sounds pretty good. I don't know what precedent it sets, but it's 1913, and it's still the year of Judith of Bethulia, and it's still only 16 minutes long. That they're getting ready to go into the end of this list is not quite assured, because it's all told out of order, because now we're back at 1910 looking at Ramona, a D.W.Griffith Mary Pickford production. And that also housed Henry B. Walthall and Max Sennett. And Max Sennett, again, being the guy that trains Charlie Chaplin. Walthall being the other producer that was producing Mary Pickford movies, and D.W.Griffith wanted to make Ramona into a silent short film. That I swear D.W.Griffith's made everything into a short film at some time is just proof of all this that I'm talking about. And it's funny because all the ones I've mentioned before so far, I hadn't really talked about in class, but now that I'm getting a refresher course from Google, and we thank Google for that, this is the beginning of our masterclass, is talking about the short films of D.W. Griffith. And this is As It Is in Life, director D.W. Griffith, 12 minutes. Silent, and this is about the Silent Hall of Fame, has created a Silent Gems collection of rare and for the first time available films with our stars, as well as other, and it's a YouTube page, and it's As It Is in Life. And I think that's one of those It's a Wonderful Life type movies where he sees what it's like if life was like without him, or As It Is in Life is kind of an ironic claim of like, well, we make it big sometimes, and then we can either, sometimes we make it back to the small grade. And you don't really know like what necessarily like deems him back to the low grade, except for that he feels as though he could have been a hero as far as it goes. And it's that whole genre of like even going up to like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, those Frank Capra type movies. This is A Corner in Wheat. And I was told this film was populist because it showed a left-wing criticism of an industry of grain and oats and wheat that make bread. And they were charging people more for it because no one could afford it anyway in the Great Depression. And this is not the Great Depression we're thinking of that's in 1930 that's even worse than this one. It's D.W. Griffith predicting another depression as bad as the one that happened in the past around the time of the end of the Civil War, which is because the South was completely drained of all of its resources once slavery was taken away. Okay, so now we're starting to get political a little bit with The Corner in Wheat. The guy gets buried in wheat. I mentioned it in the other class that he gets chased down. There's a tableau where everybody stops, and they're buying bread, and they're going to have to wait 3 years to buy any bread, you know? And then the big bread tycoon guy comes in, and he gets chased into a giant vat, and it gets filled with wheat, and he drowns in wheat. I'm not kidding, they drown the wheat king in wheat. I don't know what they're saying exactly, that a revolution is good, but I'm not promoting or dispromoting anything. We're barely get going on this thing because this thing has a long ways to go. So then there's the Musketeers of Pig Alley, which I had talked about, and that's the one where there's the world's first close-up, which Great Train Robbery kind of does a mid-shot, but that's close to a close-up in that. I think there is even a close-up in Great Train Robbery, so I'm not saying that the Musketeers of Pig Alley have the first close-up. In fact, that movie, The Kiss, where the person kisses up close on the screen, that's like one of those movies where it's like they knew it was going to be close-up and they pushed it in all the way. But the Musketeers of Pig Alley definitely has a representative scene that is a close-up, where, and actually it's a kind of experimental one, because the guys walk up the screen to the edge of it and get all close to the screen like my hand was a second ago. And then they make a close-up out of them approaching, because they get so close to the camera that it's a close-up, instead of just filming there right away, which had been kind of a selective way of filming of even Griffiths and the Intolerance and film since. And even The Avenging Conscience has like closer camera movements after establishing shots. So here's the one that I told you all about, Enoch Garden, and that's the Rip Van Winkle one. And this one is almost a feature, but it's still 33 minutes. You know, it has to be 40 minutes or above to be a feature. And Enoch Garden, with both parts, is about 33 minutes. And I thought, which stands correction for me, because I thought it was 40 minutes. The whole thing loaded was a feature film, but we're going to have to scratch that one from it, because this looks like it has both parts, and it's 33 minutes. So I thought it was 40 when I saw it. I don't think it was another version, because a lot of times they're lucky even to save the versions they have. Sometimes they have a lot of versions of the same one. There's a Way Down East that has different versions, and the one I got is an elongated version that tries to put everything on it. And I'll show you that cover in case next time or the time after we get together. This is the 5th class of this D.W.Griffith Auteur study, and we're going to the director's shorts. Now, the next one is The Chord of Life, which is 10 minutes long. And it looks as though it's from 1909, yes. It's from Silent Film Hall of Fame. And, well, it looks like such an old film that basically some of it's hard to see, but it looks kind of like a, what do you call, domestic melodrama. It looks like a domestic melodrama, like they're all doing something with the family, and the family has second guessing about it. But it looks kind of like one of those Griffith, like these all movies are kind of progressive and teaching us how to make films and pushing forward and always looking at the next thing. And, you know, there's a silent film from 1905 I'm seeing that isn't Griffith, but they had The Lonely Via, which we talked about. But this is a weird one. It's called The Book Witch, and it's only an hour 40, and I recommend it only on the grounds that it somehow got on the Griffith list because they put a Griffith movie next to it. So that's what you've got to be aware if you're putting those playlists on your playlist. They might be looking for something else, but this is silent short film For His Son, 1912. It's 15 minutes. For His Son is another domestic melodrama. These are all discussing family and family life. They're all decored by family and family life. The Burglar's Dilemma, 1912, a short drama directed by D.W.Griffith. 1912, The Burglar's Dilemma. So he steals, he almost gets caught, he has to give back, he thinks about not giving back, then he's almost going to get caught again, he escapes, he gets back. It's the whole eternal recurrence of being a burglar. You're always feeling guilty for things that you probably could have avoided but couldn't have avoided at that moment, just the necessity of survivability and everything. So it's The Burglar's Dilemma, and they do catch the burglar in that one, and it's supposed to be like a domestic melodrama in the end, where we work together as a family to catch this burglar. I'm kind of joking, but you'll see what I mean if you watch it. It's not really one of so The Song of the Shirt I've never seen. We'll have to mark this one as the only one I haven't seen. Struggling with poverty and declining health of a relative, a young woman struggles to find employment. The Song of the Shirt. It looks familiar on this preview of it, but The Song of the Shirt may be one of the ones, I don't remember that title, but that plot summary is really familiar. Alright, you guys went on Google, you found one I hadn't seen, let's go on. Song of the Shirt, yeah, I definitely need to watch that one, 1908. Edgar Allan Poe, we saw that one already. The Red Man's View, that's probably racist towards Indians, we're skipping it. I'll probably skip it watching back through. I don't want to see a racist towards Indian movie. I'm tired of racist toward Indian movies. But if you don't mind the racist view, and that's the funny thing is I keep telling my friends that, I wouldn't mind it to be friends with those same heroes of Birth of the Nation, like the Klansmen, even if they were like vigilantes and they kicked the crap out of someone that's trying to take advantage of you, and they some kind of law and order is run by them, and that all the thing I can understand, and the whole thing where you think your greatness, and usually you'd have to be like military. I could see why people would choose that route or help even a guy like me if I needed it, blah blah blah. That's really cool. Personally though, I don't really like the Native American ones the most, because the Native American ones never make sense, because nobody knew any Native Americans in 1909 really, and they didn't really talk to them or anything, so I don't really know how they got these legends about the Native Americans, which weren't always degrading. But somehow I think Griffith exaggerated such in a big way. That's why we exaggerate sometimes in this class, but he exaggerated in such a big way that it makes it look vaudevillian, and it's overproduced. Instead of having it look like overacting, it's even beyond overacting, it's overproduced. And I'm not saying anything bad about it, I just don't prefer the Indian films where they're always acting like they know what Indians are like and none of them have talked to any of them. And I'm not saying he needed to or what, but at least he's looking at it like this is what the Indians would have said. But it doesn't really go their way. I don't really know how he really felt about racism. I know that the cabin, the one, not the Uncle Tom's Cabin one that they made in Hollywood, and there's this one, A Slave in His Trust, where the slave saves the daughter of this family, and the family, she's about to get burned down in their house, and they all get away except her, and the African American character goes after the girl and saves her. I mean, that's a good film. I mean, you don't know that the slave's going to save the girl, even though, like, moments before they'd gotten blown up in war. And the Golden Louis, yeah, I've seen the Golden Louis. It looks as though, and we're going to watch these clips, it looks as though to be a melodrama, a male melodrama, but could this one be a gangster film, The Golden Louis? I can't tell by the opening props, but I have seen that. Why I don't remember Anita Hendry? These are hard to remember names. Owen Moore? Adele DeGard? I mean, these are hard names to remember. The Lonesdale Operator, 1911, starring Blanche Sweet, Charles West, Joseph Graybill. And for some reason, that's the Lonesdale Operator. That's like a romantic melodrama, kind of a comedy where the guy who's on the phone with everyone, connecting them to the right place, he's like practically in a working class job. He's an operator, and it's in 1911. An phone operator, and she comes to meet him, and it's really cool how the way they cut back and forth from him on the phone with other people to him on the phone with her, and then her coming to meet him and him on the phone with someone else narrating what she's doing. And it's a silent film in 16 minutes, and it's really cool. The Voice of the Violin. Yeah, another one that's amazing, that seems like it's about this famous violinist, and it seems like it's another musical type film before there was any sound in film. And I'm sure he was building up on orchestras, but that's 1909 compared to 1911. In 1911, a lot more had developed. And then we have The Adventures of Billy, starring Edna Foster, Donald Crisp, we've heard that name before, Joseph Graybill, Dale Henderson, Claire McDowell, Kate Boos. I mean, apparently in 1911, these are all time big names. But I'm looking at the frames before The Adventures of Billy, and I'm not sure what it's trying to say in the beginning. I almost want to click on it, but I'm going to take this as mark number 2, that I haven't seen Adventures of Billy. And the racist one I skipped, I had seen that one, the one with the red man or whatever. Don't repeat those words. It made me sound racist just now saying it. But The Adventures of Billy, I don't think I've seen that one, and it looks like it could either be a kid's movie or some kind of fantasy film, or that this guy's in like some kind of dream or something. But it looks cool. I'm chalking it up with the 2 or 3 that I haven't seen. The Lesser Evil I have seen, although it's weird that this one's in Spanish, 1912, because it says The Lesser Evil, and then it says El Mal Menor, which means the lesser evil. D.W.Griffith, and then it shows the site that it's on. And I don't know, The Lesser Evil is the one about, like, is another, like, kind of Faust type one, or it's a Paradise Lost type one, where the devil shows up and the devil's way nicer than the guy's way meaner than the devil, and it's like, shows that the guy can be more evil than the devil, and the devil gets eviled out, and the devil and the guy have an evil competition. And that's in 13 minutes, man. 1912. The Rocky Road, Silent Hall of Fame, yeah. D.W.Griffith, The Rocky Road. That is the one about the mountain journey. It's not quite like as sizable as later when they made Blind Husbands, and there's other ones that Erich von Stroheim made in the later 1910s. Blind Husbands, I think, was 1919, and already a long movie. And Foolish Wives is another Erich von Stroheim, and I think it was kind of in the, like, to set up a movie like that. Like, Erich von Stroheim didn't really say he'd seen the Rocky Road, but I could see where, like, people climbing mountains and people in these kind of movie book narratives that are it kind of seems like one of those Mary Pickford Climbs a Mountain type movies. So we've gone a long way into this, but we're almost, it looks like there's an end in sight. So please, please join me for the next few minutes, because I'm going to extend class a little beyond the finishing just these shorts. We gotta talk about some movies, and we talked about Broken Blossoms in 1919. So we're catching up with these short films. This one's The Curtain Pole, and that's 1909, and it says it's featuring Florence Lawrence, Arthur Johnson, and Billy Bitzer. Now, Billy Bitzer was his cinematography since the beginning of Birth of a Nation and before. Billy Bitzer helped with The Avenging Conscience and Judith of Bethulia. Billy Bitzer came on board at least by the time they went to the full-length movies, after Enoch Arden being a near full-length one and not being, but his 1913 Judith of Bethulia was Billy Bitzer recording it. He was the cinematographer. He was the same cinematographer that set up that shot of Babylon, which started out small on one chick and then pulled back to this huge crowd, and then pulled back to these giant statues, and then pulled back to the whole city, the whole wide city all over the place. That scene from, well, this says Billy Bitzer was on a 1909 Griffith film, The Curtain Pole. So you can see that Bitzer was devoted to D.W.Griffith for years of time, always trying to shoot an excellent shot, the way a cinematographer throughout time would revel in, that cinematographers look back on Billy Bitzer as being one of the heroes of film, is unchanceably true. Because Billy Bitzer got all the shots you could possibly get, except for like synced sound. Except they did do that in Abraham Lincoln and The Struggle. And we're struggling to get through this list, man. How many? That's like 200 films so far they've put up or more. What Drink Did. This is one of his prologues to The Struggle. I've seen that one, What Drink Did, and the guy drinks himself so hard that he falls over and hurts himself. It might actually be another one of those Greatest Question where the guy comes in, gets so drunk and falls over, but that was kind of a racist one, and I hope they don't put that on here. I didn't even mean to mention that one. It's an awful one. We're throwing out the Greatest Question. We don't want to know why they were able to haze that African American in that movie who was a guy in blackface, and blackface never really does it for me. I mean, you got like Orson Welles as Othello I can kind of handle, but don't really feel like it's justice to the Houseman Society or what even John Cassavetes had done, Peter Bogdanovich, John Cassavetes had done in his films, and so, and with his improv and with his editing, and so this is sorry, I got a little distracted there. See, the point I was trying to make is that John Cassavetes can make a film with things that are set up to show the realism of the film. And John Cassavetes has quoted that he's filmed things like Griffith's Billy Bitzer has. And Billy Bitzer has actually not seen anything like A Woman Under the Influence, for instance, which is big takes of these match-on actions and match-on dialogue. See, match-on dialogue came with a sound film. And that's where they were able to make their own kind of editing that Griffith had never seen, was a match-on dialogue. And that's why Cassavetes really evolved it from even where Billy Bitzer was at cinematography. And I got off track, but we got At the Altar, which is where some funny things go down at a wedding and they barely are able to get married. And I can't remember if they do at the end. I think they do. And then this is more documentaries on D.W.Griffith, and then The Making of a Man. A young woman, becomes infatuated while the leading man of a traveling theatrical troupe. She sneaks away to join him in the next town, starring Blanche. The Making of a Man, 1911, I've seen. Yeah, it's this acrobat or something is like in love with this chick, and it's kind of a romantic melodrama that it's not like La Strada by Fellini, it's not quite as developed. I mean, that's the problem with a short film, is you can kind of put the plot in there that's going to ring true even on La Strada or A Star is Born or whatever, and it's The Making of a Man. And it's just some 1911 Griffith film. But at this time, he was making films of higher quality because he knew audiences someday would want to watch them again. That they caught them on the internet is such a miracle, and that we still have them to look at any time we want is great. And I'm looking at the thread I'm looking at here is the 5th page already of the short films of D.W.Griffith, and at the bottom of it says 1909, The Little Darling short produced by the Biograph Company, Biograph Shorts. It was released to theaters on a split reel. Well, The Little Darling is one that I didn't really watch because it looked like one of those young kids turned superstar movies. And it looks like a Little Rascals type of movie when I watched it over here. And really, The Little Rascals, the movie, is the cool movie. So I'm not going to bag The Little Darling because it looks funny and they all look hilarious. But I'd have to watch that with, like, I'd have to really send it to the kids first and, like, make sure the kids think it's funny, you know. Because I don't want it to show up, or at least someone monitor it, because I don't usually watch kids' movies if I don't have to. They're usually... Sometimes I'll watch them if I'm hanging out with someone who wants to watch a kid's movie. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with kids' movies. And I know, for instance, director Steven Spielberg does kids' movies, but his movies are really adaptable to an adult audience. Like Walt Disney can make a kids' movie, but he adapts it to a higher standard of adults can watch this too and get entertained. And I think Star Wars is really another example of aimed for the youth, but still populates the mind of the adult. And I do believe, drum roll, nope, there's more, but we're going to stop there because I don't know how many more we've got to go through, and we've gone through more than 100, right? And it looks like there's a lot more, and we could, like, carve it out and say, well, this class is devoted to the shorts of D.W.Griffith, but problem is I'm now 6 out, 7 out. I'm 7 out and I'm still seeing new films. And they're not just the short ones. Like, I even just picked up The Love Flower, which is an hour and 45 minutes. And it's a great movie, The Love Flower. It's a romantic melodrama for an hour and 44 minutes. It's 1920. But we look at this list, and these are all coming down to be, you know, it looks like at part 7 they're starting to pan out into the newer movies, like the longer ones. Broken Blossoms is here, and Scott Lord, Silent Mary Pickford, and The Old Actor. There's still new ones on round 8. So that's one of the reasons we don't have all the time in the world to maybe see and look through all of Griffith's shorts, which the most popular to least popular have been listed. So we've listed 100 of them today, and we're still only scratching like halfway through, and I don't even have enough time. I have like 10, 15 more minutes here in Masterclass, and as I've looked ahead, it looks like there's a lot more. So I'll tell you what we'll do is we'll have one more class where we spend the majority of class, like we did this time, on finding out how far we can go into the shorts of D.W.Griffith, and I'm back at number 5, and it looks like we just got through part 5 where we're talking about that kids movie that D.W.Griffith directed. Now, next time, I'm also talking about as many shorts as I can get through, and we don't know where the ending is going to be. I'm not going to go ahead, because if we get to part 10, and there's still new shorts in the list, we're not going through any more than 100 of them. So, or 200 of them, or whatever. 200. Since we went through 100 today, we'll go through the next 100 that are least popular the next time. And we'll really have a fun time sorting out these Biograph, in some cases, and these shorts that got saved by the internet in restoration, or these movies that were digitized to rescue them in archiving. Because if the film stock is breaking down, first thing you do is restore the film. Then you play it through a machine which records it onto a computer. Then you can go back and print that onto printing film and take out all the flaws of the film and print it back through without flaws onto a new print from the old one where you've covered up the flaws and restored the print. And Now you've got it back on the computer without all the bumps and rushes and junk flip of the screen that sometimes they put in movies intentionally, like in the Tarantino movie Grindhouse, where they were putting bumps and mistakes and continuity errors, and the scenes would flip, and the film looked like it was about to rip apart, and then parts of it, the film ripped apart, and in the ones they released on DVD, they re-added the footage that they were going to put in there on each one. And I swear I saw a version in the theater where they'd already put that footage back in and still junked it and still came back to it. And then they had this, like, each one, the whole thing was like 3 hours and 45 minutes that I saw at Grindhouse. And why is it only 3 hours and 5 minutes on DVD? And the theatrical version is because there were jumps where they never showed what happened in the jump in the movie version, and that was like to act like the film was breaking down because it was like an exploitation film. And as we all know, those are the types of films that are also being restored and renovated and rerun through a computer. And you take a computer sample and you make a film print of it as well. Often in many cases, although digital recording is replacing, film recording, and there are some still, like Paul Thomas Anderson, still shoots in film. You can shoot in video. I shoot in video. I'm a low on the totem pole type guy, but my experimental films are always in video because it seems like there's such pristine, beautiful digital video nowadays that you can look at and just say, that's one heck of a picture. And all you had to do was set it up, and it's like, tell the camera to look perfect, and the camera looks perfect. And it's like, tell the camera to be like Pokemon, and the camera's like Pokemon. And just get involved with camera making and digital film and digital techniques of digital video. And I've worked in digital video so long that, like, I know there are other directors, like, I know Soderbergh did Sex, Lies, and Videotapes, which was all a digital medium. I know George Lucas did digital with Star Wars Episode 2. I know most movies are digital nowadays. I have to warn a little bit as we switch over to this next part that we're going to talk about, and that is we're going to put in D.W.Griffith 1919. We'll go back to 1919 with Broken Blossoms. And it also looks like Way Down East is going to hit us in 1920. 1920 is Way Down East. Scarlet Days, however, we haven't talked about. So, before I get to Scarlet Days, which is a great film, it's 1919, it's an hour and 15 minutes, it's a beautiful movie, I totally recommend it. It totally has this actress, it's Richard Barthelmess for one thing, and he's a great actor. He was in Birth of a Nation and Intolerance especially. Richard Barthelmess was also the Japanese guy in Broken Blossoms, and Scarlet Days is actually, in a way, better than Broken Blossoms. It's one of Griffith's highlights of his career, the Scarlet Days, which has really very little problematic about it. It's the one where the girl falls in love with the guy, but they don't know if they can get together, and they're having a good time in the summer, and then they get lost somewhere out in the wilderness, and it's like this whole thing where it's like this romantic melodrama, but it's really well done, and it doesn't have anything offensive about it. And there's like even some like European traditional quality type things about Scarlet Days, and about how it was like this period piece, and that like it comes after the restoration of the South in the Civil War, and it was this beautiful type movie. And it's not what you're thinking. It's not the Scarlet from Gone with the Wind. It's Scarlet Days. It's like that she can wear this type of clothes, and it's not like the Scarlet Letter either. It's this really innocent romance that really plays on the True Heart Susie chords. Also the year 1919, this computer's telling me. Although I had billed it as 1918, in True Heart Susie, we had heard the lady marries the guy whose brother he killed in the Civil War. They go back to the state she's at in the South, and it's a northern guy, and they're married, and they work it out because they're in love, and she doesn't mind that he killed her brother, and it's only talked about in a couple of scenes. In flashbacks in True Heart Susie is that she really, with her heart, follows her heart, and she really does love the guy she's going with. And I know that this is 1919 we're talking about, and then there's a Broken Blossoms. And then we're back to Intolerance, and we're sitting there going, okay, so what you're saying is those are all the 1919 films. And I'll check the next list, but I'm pretty sure we've gotten through that year talking about it. But we haven't quite yet. Hang on. There's a couple here I just uncovered. A Romance of Happy Valley, 1919. That one is a Hollywood romance film. Romance of Happy Valley, Lillian Gish. Okay, here comes Lillian Gish again in 1919 with Griffith. It's kind of a classy movie. It's kind of like, it reminds me of one of those movies with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby. It's kind of like that in terms of comedy, but it's more of a romance, and I don't know how to say it, but it has this kind of look to the future, at least to the TV future view that like Battle of the Sexes has, and that is it's kind of a commonplace, standard representation of motivation. I'm not going to stay long on A Romance of Happy Valley, although I did think it was one of those absolutely necessary films of his career, that it wasn't really flawed and problematic, that it was a little over-flaunting of how there was a romance with Lillian Gish, and sometimes I feel that this is the only film where Lillian Gish didn't have to run the gauntlet. Because even in True Heart Susie or Intolerance, not really Intolerance, she's rocking the baby in that one, but hear me out. Lillian Gish in the Way Down East movie, and all these movies, Broken Blossoms and Orphans of the Storm, especially those, and Birth of a Nation. She has to run the gauntlet through all of those while there's feminism in an actress becoming the first movie star in American history, and that's Lillian Gish. For acting boiled her up to being the best actress, and she became a big star, more fans than anyone, even D.W.Griffith. She had more fans than her director that she was kind of in love with. They were kind of in love with each other. They had this unsettling affair type thing in their lives a few times, but mostly it was like she was put in these movies to run the gauntlet, and it wasn't because of his relationship with her or not. The scripts were already like that. She was, and it's stunt doubles that go through it, but why is it that she's always made to look like she has to go the gauntlet? And a lot of that had to do with The Perils of Pauline and other films that are showed in serial form, because they always ended on a cliffhanger where the girl was about to go off a cliff. And I didn't like how they do that with Griffith's films, because it makes it really seem like she comes close to death, even after Broken Blossoms, where she does die. And that she dies in the movie is that whole controversial thing that people have with movies where they really think people die in a movie. Like, I did a movie once, and my cousin was supposed to, like, die in the movie, and we showed the scene where he died in the movie, and everybody thought he was dead, and I had to convince him that he didn't die for real, because we just simulated death, you know? It was horrible to say that, because you can't have anyone really getting hurt in a movie. I don't care if Rosemary's Baby goes around saying the whole cast got torched afterwards, because that probably means they just got drunk. But if you show a real death in a movie, your movie gets put to the challenge of being wiped out completely. I mean, unless you're like Blair Witch Project and have those weird background images in your mind. No, I'm kidding. It's fine. It's publicity. Check out the dead dude in my film. But Griffith, was part of that whole renaissance of the Illuminati types that were cinema Illuminati. So they're like, maybe they did plan their own death in the movie. Griffith's like, don't put my exact death in the struggle, because I won't be drinking by then, because communism will have soothed my soul. And that's exactly how we would have sounded too, not all chipper and advicey, but I'm sorry, like Broken Blossoms, she gets killed and Way Down East, she almost goes off a waterfall after a bunch of horrible things happen to her, like she gets impregnated by this guy who takes advantage of her, and then a guy's going to come save her, and then he doesn't want to at first because he thinks she's pregnant without him, and it wasn't hers, it was the guy who took advantage of her as kid, and now she's being chased. Now she runs away and falls in an ice river and is about to go over a waterfall. The guy gets there, we'd said, in a snapstick, and another version, he has to run along the edge after her and chase her down. But it's a really interesting scene. The way they cut that at the end of Way Down East is really interesting, because you get this shot of like the guy going down looking for her. Then you get another shot of her further down the river, so it looks like, by the way it's angled, it looks further down the river. The way it's edited together with her there instead of him there automatically looks like it's further down the river because we saw her come out first and come along the same kind of shape of the river that the guy did, and that looks really well planned. That the guy ends up at the end just basically coming out of nowhere and saving her is a little weird, because I thought, well, wouldn't he have had to run to get there? And he kind of does, and then in one version doesn't quite cut together because some of these films, parts of them got lost in the reanimation of cinema. So that is basically where we stand for now, and I'll come back in next week and talk about Way Down East, because there's a few more things about Way Down East. I think Richard Barthelmess is in it, and I'm going to have to check that. And he does some real good acting for Griffith in all these films. And there's this, Broken Blossoms is what I'm looking at, which is in Spanish. I think it's Giglio Infranto, and I don't know quite what that means, but must mean Broken Blossoms. And I'm sitting here in 1919 looking at all these Broken Blossoms, and there's a Birth of a Nation on the screen, and I'm like, it's 4K Ultra HD Birth of a Nation. Wow. Even I'm going to have to treat myself to that one. Get that one on a list real quick. And while I put that one on a list, no, I'm kidding, I'll do it later. I haven't seen Birth of a Nation in 4K, so I'm really excited now. Like, I'm not supposed to tell you that I really like that movie, but I just found a 4K Ultra HD of Birth of a Nation. No, on YouTube, this is too good. This is too good. Like, do I spend all night watching it so I can prep you for the next class? But do I ever find the same order of short films? Should we have gone past 100? There's so many questions this class has left. It's left going, did we get a short film shortage, even though we only got 100 of them? Did secrets come out that the new version of Birth of a Nation's out and I gotta see it? And then there's all these versions of Griffith films that are so obscure. And then in 1919, I forgot to mention earlier that we have Romance of Happy Valley. Now, for a while, we only have 1 or 2 films a year for the rest of it. Like 1920, we have Way Down East. But I'm not going to spoil what's coming next time, because we're going from Way Down East to Orphans of the Storm, maybe, and we got a lot of ground to cover there. And then we're barely coming back into it where we get the film America, and America is a very important silent film. And there's all kinds of them still to come. Like, I don't think one of the ones we've seen yet is Sorrows of Satan, which is Avenging Conscience, actually. I'm not sure if those were one and the same, but I think they are, but maybe not. Maybe there's 2 Faust movies, because I've seen some other movies located as Sorrows of Satan, and they seemed a lot similar to the Faust story. So, I didn't mean to catch a hell vibe there, but I'm just saying that is a movie by Griffith. And then here's an interesting thing I noticed the other day that'll keep you on your toes. The Struggle, the anti-alcohol movie that Griffith just makes about anti-alcoholism, is what the name of Adolf Hitler's book is when he's taking the test on Nietzsche's Mein Kampf, which Mein Kampf means the struggle, which is the answer to Nietzsche's Triumph of the Will series, which is why the movie Triumph of the Will features Hitler talking about his answers to the quiz on the Triumph of the Will script, and that's why it sounds so jointed. That Chaplin did do a movie that Griffith's kind of a cameo in, is The Great Dictator, or Griffith did The Flying of the Plane, because he was still friends with Chaplin, and they still owned United Artists, and still had kind of a hearsay, and that's when they went to Germany, found out there were death camps, came back, said Warner Brothers' Confessions of a Nazi Spy was right, and Griffith's going to go looking for the remainder of the Jewish Holocaust and put an end to it, like the Americans and the president had said at the UN that they would. And I'm not getting involved in that, except for that Griffith seemed both ways on the argument. He's both, he wants to save the Jews because they're getting killed, but he also is like kind of going back to his like Birth of a Nation, like, shouldn't we just go in there and blow the place up type thing, So I mean, it's a good thing that he found it, because then he aerated the siren, and then John Ford, who had no problem shooting down anyone in mid-sight. And we'll talk more about how John Ford killed Will Rogers in that movie Judge Priest at the end of the movie when they still film it and show it and don't really know it. And I just got done saying you can't really kill someone on film, so here's the thing, don't tell anybody this. But he wasn't excommunicated on the Klan like we thought. He was going to kill somebody. Will Rogers was. He was about to kill somebody, and it got stopped by John Ford. And John Ford made him appear in his last movie on contract, and he said that he'll kill him at the end of the movie. And don't take my word for it. Weirder things happen in Johnny Cash's recordings, but don't take my word for it. But I'm pretty sure Will Rogers bit the bullet at the end of the making of Judge Priest. If you don't believe me, it's a terrible film, and it's worse than Birth of a Nation in terms of its racism, and it's totally corny and totally hogtied. But the thing that the Will Rogers character seeps of is this kind of egregious, drunken, but aggrandizement of himself. That's kind of this whole thing where it's like he's got this ego trip going, but he's not self-assured. And then he gets knocked out with a bullet because John Ford knew that he was going to kill someone that was going to come meet him, and he didn't want him to die. Hollywood Babylon doesn't always tell the story that didn't happen. The Will Rogers case, John Ford had to kill him, so he didn't kill anybody else. And I won't tell you who Will Rogers went after, but it was intentionally a bad movie. Intentionally bad movie with a real kill in it. And if you watch really carefully, he does kind of nod and fall asleep, but he's really dead. And, me telling you this is not going to get me or John Ford or anybody in trouble. It'll get you in trouble for not knowing when the history of rock and roll was invented. Who hears it for John Ford? All right, man. It was a good masterclass, and I love you guys. We'll have more surprises next week on Masterclass D.W.Griffith Auteur. Thank you.